You're very welcome back to Ireland AM. There was more bad news for renters as the latest RTB Rent Index Report was published yesterday, showing yet more increases in average rental prices.
Yeah, and here to break down the latest figures is Threshold.ie CEO John-Mark McCafferty. You're very welcome, John-Mark. How are you this morning?
Good morning. I'm very well. Thanks very much.
So not good news this morning?
No.
I mean, there's a number of things going on here. Obviously, further increases in rents. There's some moderation in rents, but rents are still going up. They're still increasing.
Yeah.
The other, I suppose, chink of positive news is some more areas are covered by these rent pressure zones. So further moderation in places like Ennis, Limerick, Kilkenny, Waterford. So that's positive, okay?
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's some kind of strange kind of hikes in rents as well.
Yes.
Places like Galway County, here in South Dublin County, and also in Roscommon, there's some real kind of increases. I suppose for Galway, we're looking at 14% increases, something similar in South Dublin, and then a 23.7% increase in Roscommon. So what that means for people is an average monthly rent increase in the hundreds of euro, because percentages only tell part of the story. And if you're on a lower moderate income, then that is a huge kind of impact.
That's a big hit to your pocket,
in your household budget, yeah.
So these figures indicate a continued year-on-year increase of nearly 9% in rent across the country. But who are the groups worst affected by these rises?
Well, generally people on middle and lower incomes, people trying to enter the market, because this rent index that the RTB did is about new rents, new tenancies that were created in the first 3 months of this year, and they're comparing to the first 3 months of the previous year. Yes. So it's also people who don't know the rights, don't know how to navigate the rental sector and the kind of the legislation around it. Yeah. And, you know, renters are a mixed group, but you've got lots of people who are new to Ireland trying to negotiate the system. And as I say, it really is impacting on people on lower incomes, because they have very, very little discretion in terms of trying to kind of deal with these rent hikes if they're confronted with those.
I mean, we were only chatting in the news that 500,000 young people live at home still, and it is by choice because of these costs. I do feel like with rent, it is a supply and demand kind of tug of war. We're at the mercy of a lot of landlords, and actually the amount of newly registered tenancies in the report has now decreased on a year-on-year basis by 8.2%. So is this concerning?
Yeah, that's a real concern. So there's two concerns. One is obviously rents continuing to increase and particular hotspots within those increases. But as you say, the fact that the number of new tenancies actually decreased in the first 3 months of this year by that 8% compared to the previous first quarter 2022 points to a real concern around supply. Now, obviously, there is building going on right now in terms of owner-occupied housing, social housing. There's cost rental housing coming on, which is very, very welcome. But the fact that you have smaller landlords, some of them leaving the market, selling up, and then not being replenished by the kind of levels of new tenancies is a concern, because then that could, in fact, push prices, probably will push prices up even further.
Yeah. Sorry, John-Mark. You mentioned a few of the places earlier that are worst affected. You mentioned South Dublin, but you also mentioned Roscommon. I kind of understand it with South Dublin with the demand and people working here, but explain why these other places are affected so badly by it, like a 20% increase in Roscommon.
Yeah, they're outside of, they're outside the rent pressure zones, but I suppose for these new tenancies, some of them wouldn't be affected by the rent pressure zones anyway. There are just some unusual increases now. Also, the market is quite small in Roscommon, so the numbers you're talking about of new tenancies are quite low. So all you need is a handful of big rent increases to colour that figure. But it does point to a volatility and an unpredictability in the housing market, both in the urban areas and in the rural areas. So it's not that this issue of scarcity and cost is just a thing in the cities. It applies across the country, and that's why people need the support. That's why you have so many younger people who can't start to live their lives independently. They are still living with their parents, and that's a huge social issue for us.
John-Mark, you're the CEO of Threshold.ie. You provide advice to a lot of private renters, and it's a way to combat homelessness, especially in this climate. How are these figures affecting homelessness right now in Ireland?
Well, we're seeing a lot of people coming to us because their tenancies are being ended by landlords who are selling up. And for those families, those individuals, they have a reducing amount of choices. You know, if it happened 5 years ago, they usually had, you know, they could find someplace else. Now, because of that lack of supply, increasingly, their options are more around trying to source local authority emergency accommodation. And that is a very daunting prospect if you've children, you know, back to school at this stage and you have to kind of leave your home. So that's why services like Threshold exist to advise and represent tenants and to try and prevent homelessness through our tenancy protection service.
And very quickly then, if people want support from Threshold.ie, how can they avail of that?
Yeah, so they visit Threshold.ie. We have a web chat facility. So we're there 9 to 5 on the web chat and 9 till 9 Monday to Friday with our free phone number 1800 454 454. That's 1800 454 454.
Amazing.
And we can assist and advise tenants who are renting, even about small queries, but also if they're worried about losing their home, we're there for them.
And I'm sure we'll have some advice provided details on Threshold.ie. John-Mark, thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
You've enlightened us a lot on this very important issue. Now, still to come...